Hi folks, welcome back to another episode of Cretaceous Park, the rebuild. And this time we're going to be doing the Cretaceous entry area for the park. But before we get into the actual entrance area, we're going to finish off a little bit of the preliminary part of the park and build a shelter and keeper area for the Nasutoceratops exhibit. You can see I'm roughing out the overall size of the building and trying to get the walls to behave and line up where I want them to line up. So looking it over and after I did the stone walls, I decided that that was maybe a little too expensive for a park, because a lot of times zoos have less fancy stuff where the guests can't see it. So I decided ultimately to only have the stone cladding where the visitors were likely to see it and convert over to concrete. You probably noticed a jump there. I'm still having my problems with technical issues, but I have put in a concrete floor and had a little bit of terrain coming through that I needed to clear up, and setting it up for the animals' occupation by putting in hay beds. Those concrete pillars you saw going in are an animal care feature. There's also a fence there to keep the animals from getting into the keeper area. I don't know yet if this will be a sufficient size for a keeper area, because we don't have keepers yet in the game, and that will be something that's coming eventually. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a zoo tycoon game. So doing a little changes to the terraforming in the area at the entrance for the animals. I'm trying to make sure that they will have easy entry to it. But it was looking a little plain, so I decided to bring in some concrete columns to set things off. Ultimately, I would hope these will be recolorable, and I can make at least the ones in front something less than that cold bright concrete. The next step, you'll notice they are taller than the walls, and I brought in this wooden piece as I wanted to provide a venting. This is a tropical island, and humidity is always an issue. And also would help not turn this into a hot box, or at least a complete hot box for the animals. You'll notice I'm taking advantage of the scaling features for the most part to make these pieces as few as possible. Always duplicating them where I can and just sliding them over so I don't have to spend all the time fussing with the sizing. Having decided I kind of like where that looks, it's time to move on to the roof. Again, this is an animal structure. It's generally not visible to the public, so don't need to use what would be expensive materials. So here it's a simple asphalt roof, and putting on the edge trims for it. It didn't work out to completely close it in a single run, so I have that opening in the center. Before dealing with that, I decided to pull it down and seat it properly on the concrete columns, and for simplicity I decided to simply flatten the roof there. No skylight. This is a hideaway for the animals. So a little bit more work on the back of the building, and here doing the columns and raising the coping around this roof, because this is going to be a flat roof rather than an angled one. Again, I wanted to keep this and pretty much all the animal buildings, I want to keep them as low profile as possible. This makes them less visible to the guests as they pass through. So the keepers are going to need access to the building, so I need to put in some doors. And once I finish lining up the walls to reasonable satisfaction, that'll be the next process. Start with an animal door using the reinforced looking door that is part of the modern set, doubling it so it's wide enough to let animals move through it, and making them bigger so that the animals will have no problems with bumping their frills. Um, the usual trick of using a window to provide a fast and simple door frame. If I remember, I will double this up and pull it through to the other side so anyone looking through the open animal access might be able to see that. And so I guess it should be there. I may forget and if I do, it won't be such a bad deal to not have that there. Um, I don't know how many of you, always check out the animal care facilities in the back, or just go through the park as if they're a visitor and look at the animals. So, you know, sometimes it's just not worth doubling the things because of the piece count. So the keepers have to get in there, so a regular door for them, and then a window set up so they can see what they're doing as they care for the animals. I hope this will work out to be functional once we do get keepers in the game. But I just don't know. I may have to rearrange it, expand it, cut it down. I don't know. It's well proportioned now. So I decided, after I saw all that and got the roof on, that the animal door probably ought to be in the animal area. So I moved it, which led to rearranging the keeper area to have it a little bit more smoothly proportioned. And having built it, it's time to make it blend a little into the landscape with some faux pathing with the mulch and some ground plantings to blend it into the environment. Nice and shady back there on that hillside, all of which can change once I figure out how I will have to let keepers in to get to the building and such. So looking at the inside, I decided, it really needed some kind of header across there for structural purposes. So I put that in, and there it is, and we can move on. So we've jumped into the Cretaceous area entry, and you can see I've already placed some buildings, an information center, a restroom, and the cafe, and set up a patio for the information area and the restrooms. And I'm now setting up stairs because this is on uneven ground, and these stairs and the patio will need railing to keep our guests from falling over the side in their enthusiasm running around in the park. So I used the regular stairs rather than building them now that they're in the alpha. And since the ground is uneven, they went into the ground unevenly, and so I added a concrete initial step, a little bit wider than the others, but it seems to blend better with the slightly slanted ground. And the stairs proved fussier than I had anticipated because, among other things, I noticed that they were skewed. And so I had to come back in and clean them up and get them better aligned with the platform. So there's a little bit of fussy work there. And I could have cut this out of the video, but I thought it might be educational for folks to see that it doesn't always work out the way you intended. And you know, it's not all smooth sailing like the speed builds seem to indicate it is. And that's me putting in those initial uh, steps again. I pretty much had to rebuild it. And that sort of thing happens, and it's okay. Usually it means the build comes out better because you fix things that you let go the first time or had a better idea about. And that's all to the good for your park. I certainly has been for me, um, and I expect it'll be for you too. So, looking around, making sure I'm satisfied with it, and then um, expanding it out into the hillside a little bit, and playing again. Still not satisfied. Uh, because the longer you make things, the easier it is to see that they're off skew with some existing piece. So a lot of fussing here with this, and like I said, it will be all to the good for the park in the end. So, eh. uh, at least in the early stages, this is all sharpening skills for using the tools. Uh, so we've got a little jump here because, again, I was having problems with the recordings. And I built a wall to be thematically the same as the wall on the buildings, and then put it around the back to join the information center and the restrooms into a single sort of welcome center area for the Cretaceous area. And this part of the video, I'm roofing it. Moving on to the cafe, my first job was to set it into the terrain, and I decided to do that by building a retaining wall, which will have landscaping, and getting it lined up with the building. As you can see, that wall's a little short for that, so I selected the short ones, made them a little taller, and sunk them back to the same height as the other wall, just so I didn't have to add pieces. So building out more retaining wall and planting bed area, and then bringing in mulch to provide a foundation for the plants. There's, once again, the Prehistoric Kingdom mulch is very useful tool. It blends with itself so well that you can use only a few pieces to cover areas, and that's just such a nice quality of life thing for the game. So mulch everywhere, and the trickiest part will be getting that curvature right in the corner of the retaining wall. As I'm doing this, I'm working. Oh, that one retained the stretching, so it's going to make a little bit harder job. If I just clicked that off, it would have been simpler. But I didn't catch it in time and was so focused on putting the mulch down that I just worked with it. Because I'm still working out what the mulch beds would be and how big they would be and how they'd play into the front of the cafe while I was doing this. So, a little bit off the cuff on this design. I'm still debating whether I want to come back and make this some other cafe other than T-Rex, put some stuff in there to change the signing, and how much differential I want to do on the cafe itself in terms of changing its look. So again, another little bit of a jump as I start putting in patio in front of the cafe. That will differentiate it from another T-Rex cafe. But that's something I'm wrestling with. I don't know whether I like the idea of T-Rex franchise cafes all over the park, or theme them a little bit more to the areas. So a little bit of outdoor seating. I'll probably at some point come back and give them some shade screens. I don't know what that green thing was. Oh, well. Anyway, so parallel runs of planning on either side of the patio, and now do a little bit of terrain painting and starting to put this area into its natural environment so it doesn't look so raw and just plopped down there in the middle of nowhere. The wind turbine powers this area, uh, conveniently set there. It's up on a ridge, so it would get a little bit more wind than down in the valley. So it seems a good choice. It also brings a little bit of motion to the area. So I'm using the foliage brush to put in the plants here. You can see I didn't like what I got on that little island of green on the first go. And picking up and blending things in, finishing off some of this terrain stuff that was just sketched out when I put in that water area, which is going to ultimately be vital for an early Cretaceous animal in terms of providing it with a habitat. It's arguable whether putting the hardscape like rocks in first or second after the plants are in works best. I think sometimes one, sometimes the other. In the real world, of course, you put the hardscape in first because you need to get your construction equipment in to move the rocks and the dirt and stuff. But this isn't the real world in that regard, so it's much easier to choose to do it afterwards. Sinking trees there to get lots of ground cover fast and use fewer pieces. Still trying to get that thing looking aesthetic, and that's kind of the look. And there's the bridge. Going to do a little bit on this end of the bridge. That is the bridge into the Cretaceous area of the park proper. So out of the early Cretaceous and into the later Cretaceous, where most of our Cretaceous animals in the park come from. So trying to give it a little bit of atmosphere with some rocks and some plants. The amount that you use for it is going to be to your taste and your intentions. I'm deliberately ignoring the slope up there, by the way, because I have other plants for that when other animals come along. So we'll just concentrate on the area that the guests will be immediately dealing with. I realized that this is a drop off into a river on the other side of that foliage, and health and safety would really prefer it if I have some fencing to keep guests from falling in. So you're catching a glimpse there of a viewing platform. I lost the video on putting that together, sorry. But that's for that future exhibit that will be in the river there. Using the animal fencing for people fencing here is very fast and efficient compared to the modular fencing. And it's pretty aesthetic at this level. Keep the little children, if they ever show up, from slipping through the fence and running off into the bushes and possibly encountering trouble one way or another. But watching your curvature is a large part of making the fencing work against the paths right now. If it goes off a little bit, that's usually okay. I mean, right here I decided to add rocks to break up the fence run and also provide a little more direct entry kind of feel to this area after you go through the Crossroads Pavilion and head into the Cretaceous proper. I may come back and make a labeled arch for it. Done that in several sort of pre-PK test parks. because it's a thing. Um, but right now, I was mostly concerned about setting up this area, getting the foliage in, getting the rocks in, and having it look more finished before moving on into the Cretaceous proper with the rest of the animals that we currently have in Alpha, and giving them their due. So, yeah, a little bit of foliage planting cleanup here from the original build of this viewing platform, and doing it as parsimoniously as possible. Uh, I was having a little trouble with the guests actually wanting to go up the stairs. Uh, they'd come and they'd look at them or start up, and a little bit of fiddling around. I was moving the stairs a little bit. They finally figured out how to do it, so they would go up there. But there's nothing for them to see yet, so they're not terribly interested in it yet. Uh, More rocks, a little bit at the river, a little bit on the ledge there. And we're working toward the end of this episode. Yeah, lots of foliage in this one. But we'll get there, and in the next episode, we'll move on to a habitat with animals, I promise. Editing, finally building a raised area there, and then rocking it out here. Going to add modular rocks as well to provide a guest barrier, basically, to keep them from walking off the path and wandering out here. And ultimately, that will have a benefit when that river becomes a habitat. So, working ahead here a little bit on what I have in Alpha here, knowing that the devs have announced various animals are coming, and wanting to think ahead to that, whether they come in beta or they come in early access or during early access, they'll be along, and I just want to have a nice welcoming place for them. And so we're coming to the end of this episode. The last little bits there, and then there will be a little bit of a cruise through some of these areas to see them in something approaching their final form. Yeah, there's still that strip of terrace work for the exhibit, and give you a look at how it moves in. I might have more landscaping to do, but I'm getting tired at the moment, as one does. Thanks for stopping by. This is Dino Bob. Like or subscribe as you will, and see you in another video.